Thanks everybody for letting me speak today. This is my first time here. I'm going to change things up a little bit. My talk will be a little more conceptual and hopefully more entertaining, so we'll see how that goes. A little bit about myself. I have InfoSec career experience spanning 20 years. I've worked for Fortune 50 companies. I've worked for companies that had 10 employees. I've been in large IT organizations as an internal team member. I've also been an external consultant, and I have a multi-security discipline skills across the areas of technical infrastructure, design, implementation, assessment, governance, risk, and compliance. So my goals for this session, I want to share some information that might be of interest to you. Hopefully you'll learn something new, and maybe we'll have some fun along the way as well. So SMAC, what is it? Is this it? Might feel like that, but SMAC is something else. Now, show of hands, who here has heard of SMAC in relation to cloud before? Anybody? Got one over here, one over there. Okay, Gartner calls this the nexus of forces. What the hell does that mean, nexus of forces? Doesn't mean anything to me, but SMAC is social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. That means something. So, how big is SMAC? Well, it's pretty damn big. It's 4 galaxies in a universe big. How important is it? Well, about a year ago, the CEO of Microsoft decided he needed to change their go-to-market strategy. The previous CEO was calling their new look and feel devices and services. Anybody remember that? And now he said, no, that's not good enough. It needs to be cloud first and mobile first. Cloud and mobile, 2 parts of SMAC. Not sure how you get both of those to be first, but I get the idea. So let's break it down a little bit. These are my definitions of these 4 areas. Social media. It's represented by any number of public internet sites that facilitate personal interaction with a potentially unlimited audience. So, who here has heard of Flitterin? That's right, I haven't heard of it either because it doesn't exist. It could exist because it's the mashup of Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And just like this guy, you can do a whole bunch of things at one time on Flitterin all in one place. And really, when you come down to it, the social part of SMAC is all about the me's. You got like me and I have to read this here, it's a little small. Listen to me, hire me, watch me, find me. So all the me's. All the me's are part of the social part of SMAC. Every one of you is a me, every one of you has different personas. So it covers a lot of bases. Mobile, anytime, anywhere, any device, digital endpoint interactions on a potentially unlimited scale. So here's something that keeps people up at night. We got the people walking up to the BYOD vending machine, and then they go to IT and say, hook me up. And so there's a tendency to try and lock it down. But that really doesn't work. Analytics, also referred to as big data, alludes to the mashup of data from a variety of sources that enables extended data mining that would produce comprehensive information not otherwise possible. Thing about big data, it's pretty scary. You don't really know what you're going to get when you start mashing up data. What once was data that is not attributed to anybody or any person all of a sudden becomes PHI or PII. And again, it can be very scary stuff. Not only that, if you take a tool like Hadoop, which is sort of the poster child for analytics, it takes unique skills, it's expensive, and the expectations for the outcomes are maybe a little too high. But guess what? We're going there. Cloud. This is a reference for the classic internet-based third-party resources that are generally engaged at arm's length with a self-service model. And just as absurd as this may seem, cloud is the answer to everything. that is the perception in many cases, that it's the answer for every problem that exists. So regardless of how ridiculous that is, you better embrace it, because this could be you. Okay, so here's a quick overview of the SMAC forces working together, how they relate to each other. So down in the bottom right, we have the cloud, which provides capacity to the mobile users and to the analytics backends. The mobile devices provide social activity to the social network, and in turn, the social network provides social marketing back to the mobile user. And the analytics is the back-end engine for all of this. It provides feedback for the voice of the customer, and the mobile activity is also another source of information into the analytics engine as well. So why does SMAC matter? Well, business is changing to a more collaborative, customer-centric environment aligned with progressive business strategies. So that means that SMAC forces will play a strategic role in meeting that change, and new and emerging initiatives will likely leverage SMAC to get there. But most importantly, customers and consumers will demand it to be there. So how will it change the information tech landscape? Well, new and unforeseen security trends will emerge due to the contemporary variables that develop because of the new facets of those four things interacting with each other. Because of that, traditional security controls will fail to keep pace, and impacts to IT security product selection and budgeting will be significant in order to keep up. So this wheel moving around from north to east to south to west is basically representing the notion that as you move around the wheel, your governance control diminishes as you go from analytics, where you can possibly have a lot of control through things like classification of data and data tagging and DLP and DRM. When you move to cloud, you move a little bit further away from control. You can certify your vendors through procurement processes. As you move to social, it starts to get a little more dicey as to who does what, when, and how. And as you get out to mobile, now you're talking about any device. Somebody's at home with their Xbox and they need to do something at work, and all bets are off on the platform. So again, in the square in the middle, we talk about for social, you can work on increasing your assurance levels. For mobile, there are ways of addressing device and application management, and you can do things like binding your mobile devices to your social identities to try and retain a little more visibility and control. So, what to do? And in most cases, as in life, it becomes a question of balance. Anybody recognize this image here? This happens to be, it's an album cover. Yeah, it happens to be the Moody Blues from the early 70s. I just happen to like the philosophy of a question of balance. But it's definitely applicable here. And the thing about security is I take a different approach, I think, to most people. I think of security first as an enabler. So really the mission here is to enable business on a secure and resilient foundation, rather than security being the moat or the protection. I want to look at it as something that you can use to launch further beyond where you are today. So, what are some examples of proactive activities that can reduce SMAC risk? So, in the social realm, it comes down to mostly identity, I believe. And so identity assurance levels become a trust point for utilizing this element. And some examples out there in the world today are NISTIC, which is a government private sector advocacy group consortium that was formed in 2011. It's a trust framework for federation and an ecosystem for IDs. FIDO is another example. Fast Identity Online, it's a 2013 industry consortium with a specification for a full range of multi-tech factor authentication. And I just read this week that NISTIC joined the FIDO Alliance. So I thought that was a fairly significant event in that particular realm. In the mobile realm, as I mentioned, device and application management are effective methods for increasing the value and reducing the risk of mobile devices. Also, binding the mobile device to an assured persona ID, aka device pinning, can take trust to a higher level. That's what I was referring to in the previous slide. Analytics, again, we talked about data-centric technologies and controls to provide tools to minimize exposure of uncertainty and damage. Examples are data classification, leak data, DLP, DRM, all tied to relevant access controls. And in the cloud space, supplier certification, making sure that the cloud vendors have a good program in place. And cloud governance platform, that's a name that I coined myself. Remember that, we'll be talking about that in a minute or two. The CGP can provide visibility and data control over a cloud service that the vendor may not be able to provide otherwise. So let's do a quick shallow dive into what cloud computing is. There's 5 essential characteristics. The first one is on-demand service. Second one is broad network access, and again, anytime, anywhere, any place, any device. Resource pooling, so resources are not dedicated to any one particular task. They're used on demand as needed. There's rapid elasticity. So if I have 10 servers and I have a big event, I can ramp up to 100 servers very quickly by just pushing a few configuration buttons and be on my way. And finally, it's a measured service so that I only pay for what I use. So this is the NIST model of cloud computing, and on the top layer, those are the 5 characteristics that I just covered. In the middle, we have the service delivery models. So software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, and then at the bottom, we have deployment models. We've got public, private, hybrid, and community. So just for the sake of argument, what are the examples of service delivery models? Well, Salesforce.com is the poster child for software as a service. Amazon AWS is the platform as a service that everybody knows about. Verizon Terramark is the infrastructure as a service. And then if we look at the deployment models, we got public, that would be AWS again, as an example. Private would be an enterprise cloud. Hybrid would be the combination of the AWS and the enterprise cloud. And a community would be a customized public cloud subset. Okay, so this is a graph that to me is sort of a spectrum as you go left to right here. And the yellow represents the subscribing tenant entity or the enterprise, and the blue is the vendor, the cloud service provider. So on the right-hand side, we see software as a service, and we see that the vendor has complete control over everything, and the organization has very little control in most cases. So as you move across to the left, platform as a service, you start to share a little bit of responsibility and visibility and control. Infrastructure, you give up a little, you gain a little bit more. When you get over to the far right, now you have complete control because you're within the enterprise environment. The point here is that the boundaries matter, and where you make the compromise to give up control and visibility will matter in the end. And as the previous speaker mentioned in his talk, the cloud vendors usually will not take responsibility for your data. So when you're over on the far right-hand side, it's up to you to take action that they're not going to. So just for industry trends, the drumbeat of cloud computing just keeps getting stronger. And here's a graph that's a little bit dated, but it's still trending true. IT spending on cloud is going to triple between 2011 and 2017. So it's really an unstoppable force. So cloud governance platform, I talked about this a little bit earlier. I'm going to deep dive into it a little further now. A cloud governance platform is a tool that you can leverage from a third-party vendor that would sit in between your application in the cloud and your users. It could either be on-premise or in the cloud itself, and it gives you control, analysis, and discovery over the usual suspects, which are the items over in the right-hand cloud there with Box and Office 365 and Salesforce and so on. So whether your users are at home, in your enterprise, mobile, whatever, this platform is going to give you visibility that you didn't have otherwise. Mobile users, even if they don't come through your enterprise, you can still have visibility and control over their activities. And again, Gartner has another term for this. They call it a cloud access security broker. A little too wordy for me, but there you go. So the part about the mobile user, that's pretty significant because otherwise your mobile users running Box.com app on their smartphone, you lose complete visibility without a cloud governance platform. Whether you have tools in your enterprise, it's pretty much gone out the door. So let's talk about two use cases for cloud data control and visibility, strategic initiatives, cloud governance platform for Box.com and cloud governance platform for Salesforce.com. So in an enterprise setting for Box, typically what happens is you may invoke SAML assertion, a single sign-on to Box from your enterprise, and you basically tell your users, okay, there it is, go ahead and use Box. And for me, the real value add in Box is collaboration. The fact that you can just drop files in the Box cloud is okay, but the fact that you can collaborate those files with other people, especially third parties outside of your organization, is really where the value is. Well, without a cloud governance platform, you really don't know much about what's going on out there in the Box cloud. But with a cloud governance platform, here's an example of 12 file events that you will have real-time monitoring and logging of all these activities that occur. And what's really most important here for me are these two in the right-hand column, share and invite collaborator. So now you have more visibility about what's actually going on. So you can tell your users, okay, we're going to allow you to share regulated data with third parties, but only with the parties that we have quality assured through our own kind of governance function to make sure that they're HIPAA compliant or PCI compliant or whatever. If you don't do that, we're going to know about it, we're going to get alerts, we're going to take action on those things. So this particular kind of platform can actually either be inline or it can be offline, meaning that it sits off to the side and through an API, it's looking at the Box file activities without even being in line with the user to give you back that control and visibility and feedback. So what additional features can I leverage with those 12 functions? I can do policy-based pre-cloud storage encryption if I like, so that I don't have to trust Box.com to handle my data any particular way because I'm encrypting it myself. I can invoke DLP independent of the cloud service, and I can optionally integrate it with my own existing enterprise DLP policy engines. I can retain enterprise-based granular access controls completely independent of what the cloud vendor provides. And again, a big win here is the mobile device coverage for BYOD and extra enterprise source devices as well. So somebody fires up the browser on their Xbox and they go to Box, they have credentials to get in, you're still being able to monitor what they're doing through that kind of a session, even though they're not on your enterprise, they're not even on a sanctioned piece of equipment. So what features can we leverage in order to support sharing of PHI and PII regulated data with third parties? We can have live audit log and event access monitoring. We can, in real time, have DLP anomaly detection and instant notification. Again, we can have coverage for native mobile and or desktop clients. And we can also do something interesting like a scheduled scan for discovering interesting content. So even if you put up a policy that says, here's the rules of engagement, here's the things you're allowed to do, even if you're not looking for specific things in those policies, you can define regex queries and other kinds of unstructured data inquiries into the data in the entire store to understand what other kinds of activities are going on within that environment. So here's an example of a log file from the DLP engine that occurred in box. And in the third column from the right, we see the anomaly value. So we have a couple credit cards, some social security numbers, a HIPAA member ID, and we will immediately see the user that was involved in that particular event. Some other attributes, time and date stamp that occurred. This is our actionable information if there's a policy violation, for example. Okay, moving on to Salesforce, Cloud Governance Platform. Here's the model for Salesforce. Thing that's key to this particular architecture is the fact that it is specifically inline. So we're doing a little DNS manipulation here. We're doing crm.abc.com on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, we're actually going to abc.salesforce.com, the real URL. But more to the point, the encryption that is being invoked within the cloud vendor, the root keys, the session keys, the store for those keys is being handled on the enterprise. Over there on the right-hand side, the Vault key server is on premise. It could be any particular kind of key server. It doesn't have to come from the cloud governance platform vendor. Through the KMIP protocol, Key Management Interoperability Protocol, the premise key agent can query the key server for session keys, push them out to the cloud, and even the cloud vendor is not really going to have a knowledge of those keys and how they're derived. So now you still maintain control of that data. And all the data that gets stored in Salesforce is still under your domain and control. So in this particular case, we have a transparent inline proxy with an API interface to salesforce.com, providing field level encryption and DLP scanning according to your enterprise policies. This slide here is actually a little bit overlapping with the previous discussion. The graph on the upper half, if you go across the horizontal axis, you're looking at preserving functionality in your encryption selection type. If you go across the vertical axis, you're talking about the encryption strength. So we got 7 different kinds of encryption techniques here to be able to protect your data in order to strike a balance between preserving functionality of that data, such as searching and indexing, those kinds of things, and the encryption strength that you would be able to affect. And then the bottom half are basically some academic papers, probably from the same realm as the previous speaker, and the heavy math that goes into those theories that go into those papers. But the product of that research are these 7 different encryption types. So this particular slide here is a screen grab from a tool that you might use to configure the encryption types for your Salesforce.com application. It's a little fuzzy, but the first column represents the name of the field. The second column is the API name. So every time that particular field is in a particular application or a record, you're identifying it by the API name rather than just the field name. The third column represents the occurrences of that API within the application. And then the fourth column represents the type of encryption out of those 7 types that you want to apply to that particular piece of data in order to strike that balance again between functionality and encryption strength. So, final word, cloud computing is just going to keep exploding. It's something that you really can't push off to the side. It's going to be there. It's going to come at you from every which way. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Well, one question per day, you gotta have something.
I blinded them with science.
You did. Nice job.